We're going to look at a fairly simple technique for modeling a plant, such as this one in 3ds Max. Basic principle of this is working with textures placed on individual planes. You can see this one here, where we've got an image of the leaf, and we've got opacity mapping to make parts of the plane transparent. So let's get started. I'm going to hide all of those planes there, and we've essentially got a stem made from a loft object. Incidentally, a little technique for this, I'm going to start it with creating a helix. There's my helix. I can go in and adjust my height, radius of turns, etc. But when I want to manipulate this as editable spline, I will find that I have too many verts to be able to control it in any useful way. So there is a modifier called Optimize Spline, which I can apply and turn on Show Knots, and then adjust the percentage. So if I increase the percentage, I can reduce the number of vertex points. Let's go to about 88%, it's fine. And I can then, let's convert it back to editable spline again. So that's one way of creating profile for your plant. So manipulate it a little bit further, and we loft a circle along the length of the stem. So there's our circle. Create compound object, loft, get path, click on our path. We can go into our modify panel, take the scale, and we can taper it towards the tip, something like that. Gets us a fairly easy stem. Obviously you can make multiple stems, manipulate them in different ways. We can also, in our skin parameters, adjust the number of path steps and shape steps. As you can see, if I increase the shape steps here, I get a lot of dense mesh. Reduce them, I get very simple mesh. Similarly with the path steps, more path steps gives me more density, etc. So depending on the kind of shape you want. So the texture that I'm using, if I bring up my materials viewer, is, let's just hide that for a moment, is this from textures.com. It's a free download. Comes with an opacity map, in this case the black and white version there. And I've also made a slightly brighter version of it, which I've put into the specular roughness channel, and I've made a bump map from it in Photoshop in the bump 2D material or map onto the normal channel of my Arnold material. In Photoshop, just making that, this is the bump map that I created in Photoshop. Basically I took my my plant texture, desaturated the color, and I went into the curves and did something like this. So I went into the curves and took my grays to black, boosted some of my lighter grays to give me the kind of texture of the bumped surface of the leaf, and I brought that in. Here, as I said, I made a bump 2D map onto my normals, and I think if I double click on that bump 2D map, yeah, I increased the value of it there to get better effect. So I'm creating a plane then for my leaves. Plane, and the dimensions that we had were 1024 by 716. So 1024, this is the pixels of the image, by 716. Obviously that's scaled way bigger than we want, so let's scale it down closer to the proportions of our desired plant. And let's do something like that. I'm just going to hide the original there. Okay, so this plane, we can assign our material to it, and we've got that going on. So a couple of things we want to do. First is we want to move the anchor point or pivot point of the object down to the base of the leaf stem there. So I'm going to go third panel in here, and I'm going to select Effect Pivot Only. I want to move that pivot to line up with the base of the stem approximately. That gets me that. Let's then go to the Modify panel, and we are going to convert our plane to editable poly, and I'm just going to manipulate it in a few different ways. Let's take some verts here and pull them downwards. I'm just going to turn on soft selection, adjust my fall off distance to pick up some more of the leaf. Let's try rotating, increase that fall off a bit more. So you could use a bend modifier for this kind of thing if you prefer. Let's bend some of these. Some of these. Gets me something like that. Just going to turn off the soft selection, and we're ready to go. Maybe we'll pull this down a little bit. So depending on what you want to achieve, you can get a different kind of leaf. So we'll work with this. We've got our pivot point set up, we've got our leaf set up. I have a material assigned to the leaf. I've also created a material for the stem, just given it some specular roughness and a colour. So let's assign that to the stem. And now what I have to do is to just make some copies of this leaf along the stem, and then we're done. So I'm going to take the Select and Place tool. This will allow my plane to align itself to the normals of any adjacent geometry. That gets me something like that. I can still, having done that, I can say, well, I want to rotate it or position it differently. Let's go back to the Select and Place tool again, and I'm going to press Shift to make a copy and make some more copies along the length of the surface. And spending a little bit more time fine-tuning this will obviously get you better results. We're just going through the principle here, so let's go to something like that. So aligning those to the surface gets me